Recording in progress.
This is a regular meeting of the Pacific Grove City Council. I'll call the meeting to order. Note that all council members are in attendance and ask Councilmember Emilio to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Turning to reports by council and staff, our city attorney, Mr. Pirk.
Yes, we had two closed sessions earlier today and there's no reportable action from either item.
And our city manager, Mr. Mogensen.
One quick announcement, just a preemptive reminder that in Pacific Groves, fireworks are legal. That's the safe and sane and the regular one. So as we approach the 4th of July, everybody just keep that in mind.
All right, now, general public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, my colleagues. Councilmember announcements, Councilmember Emilio.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to bring up that Flag Day, we just finished June 14th, and it was actually, they made it Flag Day in 1877. They always made it on June 14th. I also want to compliment the commissions. We have 17, which also includes subcommittees, all the volunteers. There's a ton of them, and I just wanted to compliment all the commissions and advisory commissions and so forth for that. And that's it.
Right, moving on to general public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in council chambers, please come forward. Podiums on your right. Welcome. And the light should be off before you speak. The little red light at the microphone. So press the button and the light should go off. Okay.
There we go.
Thanks.
Perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Keith Roots. I'm the founder of the Giant Kelp Restoration Project in Monterey. I first learned to scuba dive in 1985 when I first fell in love with kelp forests. One of my favorite dive sites was the thick and fishy kelp forest at Lover's Cove. That's where I learned to take off my scuba tank and put it in front of me so I could swim over the kelp. In 2009, I learned to identify and count fish and taught scientific protocols for reef check. In October 2013, we watched sadly as 22 species of starfish were decimated by a wasting disease that just turned them to goo. The ocean was overheated by the blob, a warm water event that lasted through 2016. Kelp needs cold, nutrient-rich water and sunlight to grow. And without that, the urchins emerged from the cracks and ate the kelp. Lover's Cove became an urchin barren in 2017. Now urchin barrens dominate around the Monterey Peninsula and have spread down the Big Sur coast to Morro Bay. Urchin barrens are an alternative stable state. In 2018, we did a kelp experiment in Pacific Grove, west of Lover's Point for 3 years. We reduced the number of sea urchins on patch reefs to low density prescriptions And we proved that kelp could naturally recruit if the urchins were reduced. We also learned that volunteer scuba divers could do the work very well and were undeterred when the beach was closed in 2020 and entered the water from the rocks. In 2021, we received a sport fishing rule amendment from the California Fish and Game Commission to call an unlimited number of sea urchins at Tankers Reef, which is just east of the commercial wharf in Monterey. Volunteer scuba divers learned at local dive shops how to safely cull 750,000 urchins, or 1,527 dives, and grew an 11-acre kelp forest in a former urchin barren. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife and Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, Ocean Protection Council, and Reef Check California were our allies. But after 3 years, our amendment was allowed to sunset, and we no longer have a legal place to cull urchins anywhere on the Central Coast. We again petitioned the Fish and Game Commission to allow volunteer divers to restore kelp forests in the best places, the marine protected areas around the Monterey Peninsula, which includes submerged lands within Pacific Grove city limits. In Pacific Grove, where there was poison oak, the attraction is now purple non-native ice plants planted by volunteers. Let's begin kelp restoration and ecotourism, where visitors garden in a regenerative fishery in the Pacific Grove Garden State Marine Conservation Area and protect it as a state marine reserve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Welcome. All right, to begin, I want to pass this around. Stephen King giving John Lennon's last autograph.
About 40 some odd years ago, I went into my library looking to see what happened to Mark David Chapman, the guy allegedly killed John Lennon. And I accidentally stumbled on the cryptography in the bold print of Time Newsweek. The headline about just elected Reagan read who's in, who's out, like Reagan's in, Lennon's out. He was sitting next to Nixon's book, which talks about killing John Lennon. Long story short, I eventually found it was Stephen King. You can pass that around to each member. Stephen King getting the autograph. Stephen King shot John Lennon. I have a website, LennonMurderTruth.com. It details everything. I've been here for 8 years recently, and this is my message. California, failing messenger. I remember I spent about as many years in San Francisco and Berkeley, and I left them with a sign that says, wasted on Bay Area deviancy. Since I've been here, the Italian mafia that runs the Central Coast have been sitting on my face like a fat woman. They have been limiting these allowance of time at the Monterey City Council to 2 minutes for the last 3 months because of me, and no other reason but because of me. Everyone else only gets 2 minutes because they want to shut me down. I will be moving to Utah and take my glorious expose out of California for good. And I'll be the most famous human being on earth bragging on how California was a deviant society that didn't care about this. I will lower property values if you drive me to the point I have to do that. I'll be here until March 1st, and then I'm leaving to Utah. And I'm from California. I've been in California my whole life. This is the greatest story that's ever been told in America. This is the biggest story since Christ. This is the biggest expose of all time. And people have a blasé attitude about it. And they're jealous of me about it. And they're afraid of me about it. It's a terrible fact of the human race that when real big truths emerge, they like to shrink like a coward and let the bad guy get away with it. Well, Stephen King admits he's a Jewish communist. Nixon and Reagan were infiltrates. Barack Obama is an infiltrate. In fact, he gave Stephen King a Medal of the Arts Award before he left office in the White House, knowing he killed John Lennon. 10 days before the Oklahoma City bomb went off, the Clintons secretly invited Stephen King into the White House for some kind of a meeting. 10 days later, the Oklahoma City bomb went off. And there's all kinds of treachery going on. Right now, we've got Biden trying to sabotage America with immigration and inflation and transsexual, this, that, and the other. It's no accident. He's doing it on purpose to destroy us. LennonMurderTruth.com.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? How about online? Sir, would you please sit down? Do you have anyone online wishing to speak?
We do. We have Marcia.
Thank you. Good evening, all. There was an article in Carmel Pinecone Friday regarding our police chief, Kathy Madelone. And it's very troubling because, and I'm not the only one who's troubled. A friend who is a member of Nextdoor said there was a thread with 50 people who 50 posts. There was her name came up in a local podcast this weekend. I mean, people are Pegrovians are very concerned about what's going on. We are paying now for 2 police chiefs. One is acting, and that's a good thing that we actually have someone at the helm, but we're also paying the full freight for a police chief who has been away from her job since last August. She's been, I guess, doing things remotely or not. And it just doesn't seem very financially appropriate. Okay. And with our CA being a partner of one of the best known, largest law firms that does work for government agencies, I just don't understand why this hasn't been resolved. Why Police Chief Kathy has not been put on disability. I mean, it just surely Burke Williams has the specialized legal staff in workman's comp disability that could go through all these rules and regulations to figure out how to resolve this properly. Hopefully you've been given a medical diagnosis. It's not a HIPAA violation for a medical diagnosis. Hopefully you've been given evidence that the injury was job related, and hopefully you maybe asked for a second opinion of your choice to have Police Chief Kathy, examined. It's puzzling and people are upset, and there has to be some resolution, and please have Burke Williams dig into this further, because otherwise it's just gossip and rumors. Thank you very much.
Ms. Dahmer.
Thank you. It's interesting that Marcia brought this up. We still don't even know each other, but this member of the public, myself, is going to speculate that Chief Madelone was not liking the atmosphere, had her injury, and now has been out on full pay and supposedly working remotely from home while she runs out the clock on getting her pension, because that's what's coming up next. When she comes back to work for, I don't imagine that it'll be for more than a couple of weeks, that she then puts in for her retirement and pension from the city of Pacific Grove, where she's been running up the bill all along. And yes, I'm an uninformed member of the public, but that's pretty much what I'm thinking. She's right there with the spikes of running up the pension, and here we go. So I would like the city to do something about this, and I know it's a personnel matter, but so it's obviously off limits for these members of the public, but we can speculate, and that's the speculation. And you know, I'm on no social media. I'm not getting it from there. I'm just looking at a pattern and I'm seeing the pattern loud and clear. So wake up. Thank you very much.
We do not have any more public comment online.
All right, anyone on council wishing to pull a consent agenda item? Anyone from the public wishing to pull a consent agenda item?
We have Marcia.
Hi, thank you. I'm not sure if this is a consent agenda item or not, but I'd like number 7A pulled for public discussion. That has to do with the budget.
Ms. Dahmer.
Okay, oh, another one? Okay, 7A,
Thank you.
Marcia.
I would like to pull 9B and 9C because I would like more information on them, please. Thank you very much.
See.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the amended consent agenda?
Second, I guess.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, we'll move on to the first item pulled, which was 7A by Marcia. And let me first check with our city manager. My understanding is there has not been any change in the proposed next fiscal year budget, but we have an understanding that this will come, we're going to be talking about amending the budget possibly in September. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. There's no difference from the budget that was presented June 5th meeting to tonight. Just a
All right.
second reading.
All right, thank you. So to you, Marcia, did you have a question or a comment about the budget?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, these are some questions. I didn't realize that there were new staff positions, FTE and half-time and quarter time being considered. I mean, some of these positions like CDD, management analyst, grant writing for $123,000. That's a lot of money. And CDD staff already do grant writing. Also, you know, the administrative assistant for half-time for $28,500 public works. Are these being considered or are they already in the budget? Because I would suggest that these are kind of optional jobs that other staff are already doing, and they're not essential. I'd also like to remind council that in a recent article I read in Bloomberg, that California homeowners' costs have increased 26% on average since the pandemic. That's a lot of money that we're paying. And, you know, I think there should be some sensitivity in what you decide for, you know, spending the excess $1 million revenues. I don't think these staff positions are essential at all. And also, I guess there was other uh, things that were considered, like I guess training for paramedics. I thought firemen already had that training. Then there was, I mean, for a staff position, I would suggest the forester is a good one. Hopefully we won't need the arborist consultant. I'd also suggest an organizational consultant to see if we have the right positions in the departments, and that one department isn't too overstaffed as opposed to the other. So I'm just sort of flabbergasted because these details didn't come up in the June 15th meeting or the June 5th meeting, I guess, unless I had my ears plugged. I didn't hear the specifics of these new jobs. And, I don't need to remind you, we have a $66 million pension underfunding liability. Each FTE added is a problem.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this agenda item?
Ms. Garcia.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your service. I just wanted a couple of clarifications, and I'm happy to take the response offline. You don't have to spend time right now, but I'm wondering whether or not the Monarch Sanctuary is going to get its new fence. And then also, Mayor, I know you had mentioned a certain dollar amount to try to address unhoused populations, and whether or not that will be advanced as well. Those are my only two comments. Thank you very much.
We do not have any more online comment.
All right. Mr. Mogensen, would you like to clarify on the new positions? I think that would be worthwhile.
Sure can. Yes, so as I mentioned, the staff report and the agenda item was the same from June 5th until tonight. So I do have our position requests list on page 52 that kind of describes what these were for. So the management analyst in the community development department is going to be half to support our housing program. And we have a CDBG program that has quite a few loans out there and a lot of stuff happening. So this is going to be a position that helps support that, and to eventually also, if we do an additional allocation of unhoused money for unhoused people, that they would also support that. The other half of that is for the administration of the department. And it has to do with a lot of different office work that needs to get done within, I guess, the division. We've talked about, we lost a planner who did our water program before. So this person would take on the water program. This person would also be involved in all the counter work that helps people up front. So there's going to be quite a few different duties that this person will fulfill that will take some of that work off of the planners so that they can concentrate on planning work, for the most part. The reason for the cost is that's fully loaded. So that would mean the salaries and benefits and all of it would be included in that amount. And in addition, I point out that this is 50% paid by the general fund, and then 50% will be paid by the housing fund, which is non-city general fund money. The senior program manager this is just a quarter of a position. So the existing deputy finance director or director of finance was at some point a couple of years ago taken down to 3/4 time because the employee in the position requested that. That employee isn't here anymore, and we're trying to recruit to fill it. And so we're bumping that back up to a full time. But it's a position that is we need to fill. So it's been open for quite a while, maybe a couple of years maybe. The administrative assistant half-time position in the public works department, I think a lot of that is being funded by 25% from the sewer fund. So again, it's not general fund, and that's gonna be used for a lot of administrative duties, including some of the continuous updates. So we're trying to get out there in clear glove so the public understands what's happening with different construction projects. We also have to do mailers for different projects that are happening. We mentioned website notices and kind of some internal operational needs that they've identified. And I think, at a halftime and then 25% coming from the sewer fund, the impact to general fund on that one is not too great. The paramedics program, from what I understand, we signed on to that one, I think back in April or, a little bit earlier. And that's just adopting what the city of Monterey is already providing. So we're bringing on additional resources so that we can have a full paramedics program on our fire engines when they respond to our residents' homes, which is, you saw the presentations, but that's a pretty important thing overall.
I'll just jump in to add
Sure.
that our firefighters are not trained paramedics.
That's correct.
Currently, one, the Monterey Fire Department, which is providing our fire service, is upgrading them. So, thanks.
There were a couple other things mentioned, and I'm not sure I noted them all. So was there another question that I perhaps?
Well, Carmelita Garcia asked about a response offline, a new fence at the Monarch Sanctuary, and funding for housing folks that don't have houses or don't have homes. And we're going to be talking about that in September.
Correct. And I can answer really quickly on the Monarch Sanctuary fencing. It was our hopes that it wouldn't be so expensive that it would exceed an existing maintenance budget or something like that. But as we looked into it, we understand it's probably a rough estimate is probably about $70,000. So that's a little bit outside of our current line items. So that'll be one of the items that's in our adjustment and when we come back in August, September. And the same thing with the money for unhoused people, in addition to a number of other things that were mentioned at the meeting last time.
Thank you. Council comments, Councilmember Beck.
Thank you, Your Honor. And to Marcia's question, and I think you've answered it, but I just want to reiterate regarding the paramedics. It was actually brought to my attention by firefighters last year, Monterey firefighters, that we did not have a paramedic in Pacific Grove. And that was very concerning to me. And I spoke to Chief Panholzer at the time, who assured me he would start working on a contract that we would have paramedics here in Pacific Grove. And then when Chief Miller took over, I reached out to him as well, and he assured me he was moving forward with that. So council probably doesn't realize where it started, but when I heard we did not have paramedics in Pacific Grove, I was shocked. And I think it's been well over 10 years where we've done the contract with Monterey, and Monterey has had paramedics, and the importance of having paramedics on a truck is life-saving. So given the demographics of our community, I was very pleased to hear that the council, I was not at that meeting, that you voted in favor of it. And I think Chaps Paduri, Councilmember Paduri even said it's a no-brainer, right? How come we don't have one? So I'm glad it was brought forward. And I just want Martha to be aware that we do not have paramedics currently, but they're working on making that happen. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'm just going to move the recommendation. We've discussed and appreciate the additions tonight.
I'll second that, but let's have discussion on the motion. Councilmember Coletti. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, moving on to item 9B, amended agreement with HDL companies. Inga, that was your question. You have a question or comments?
Ms. Dahmer?
Yes, Mayor, I do. I mean, I've been so unimpressed with HDL for the whole time we've had a very bloated contract with them. And remember, I'm one of those old timers that goes to all the meetings. And I hope this one is very limited and phasing them out and finding a new contractor for these things, because I do not have any trust in HDL, and they're very old reports. And I am not in any admiration of their competence. So I am wondering what this $60,000 contract is really covering. Is there a limit, and are they going to be phased out at some point soon here? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
We do not have any public comment online.
Mr. Mogensen, would you care to respond? I think the questions are answered in the agenda report.
Yeah, I think so. I think, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. They are, within there and in the vendor services agreement. We could at some point in the future come back with a more robust presentation and all the services that are provided, but I think it would take a while to go through each one and all the things that happen within those. But on a high level, they do sales, use and transaction tax, auditing and kind of collection for us. They help us understand trends within the state of California and our local area and help us forecast what our revenues might look like. And that's on the sales and use tax. And then also listed here generally as property tax. Transient occupancy tax, they also help us make sure that our hotels are reporting correctly and that we're collecting that money as well on time. And then business license is kind of it's a function that we have contracted out, if you will. So instead of hiring staff ourselves here at the city of Pacific Grove, we've entered a contract with HDL to license businesses. And then there's other services they provide too, as far as auditing and tracking down people who don't have a business license and things like that. So, and we do have a representative on the phone if that's helpful, or if that's a large enough description for tonight, then.
I'll just add that this does not cover the HDL consulting services that have been provided to the Economic Development Commission by Barry Foster and a colleague. That's a separate agreement. Councilmember Clay.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I appreciate that there's someone from HDL here to speak to the services. One thing I noticed, so we have a business license, tax, operations, and compliance services. Maybe our HDL representative can describe how this compliance actually works. I mean, we've all seen the recent news articles about some business licenses not being paid, or the tax not being paid, and the licenses. So maybe we can understand how the compliance works if the person from HDL could explain that.
Apologies, I did not hear the question because while I was getting promoted to panelist, it cut me out. So if I could have you repeat, I'm so sorry.
If I could help out a little bit. So the question was, can you tell us how the compliance services overall work?
Especially for business.
For business license, yes.
Absolutely. Thank you. The compliance portion of the contract is split up into three components. The first is collection activity. So that focuses on outstanding debts that are owed to the city with regard to taxes. So following up on delinquent filers and people that are sort of known to the city that aren't paying their business tax. The second function is what is referred to as discovery. So that is discovering and identifying people that should be paying taxes to the city, but are not. So they've been sort of operating in an underground economy from within the city, or for those businesses that are coming in from outside the city and conducting business without going through the proper registrations or paying their taxes. And the final component is an audit component, which is just validating that businesses reporting their gross receipts and income are accurately reporting that and paying the city the right amount of money.
If I could also add a little bit to that, because we were talking through this a little bit earlier today to help us all understand better. And over the last couple of years, there's been some different things happening during COVID. And a lot of cities were suspending some of their programs when it came to collection and a little bit more of the more aggressive type measures towards businesses. And I think perhaps there was a little bit of that had happened in a couple of instances. Could be one reason why we saw some discrepancies. But going forward, we talked about picking up all the regular programs as well and continuing to do the compliance and the audits and everything else.
Any other council discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll move the recommended action.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, on to 9C. Door access control implementation. Inga Dowmer, do you have any questions or comments on this one?
Ms. Dahmer?
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do. Somehow it alludes to a survey of why this is necessary and different reports that I didn't particularly see on, I don't know, I'm looking at this as like the bulletproof glass that, I mean, I'm not quite sure why these door access, but it's supposed to be that we need it. And it's certainly more money than a Monarch fence. So it's kind of an interesting thing. $82,000, I think it was. I'd really like to hear more of 87, excuse me. I'd like to hear a little more about it because I couldn't really find different reports on this. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
We have Marcia.
I really don't know Inga. But tonight we seem to have a meeting of great minds. I also wondered about the security doors and the high price. I mean, and the reason cited, City Hall is located right next door to the police station. I mean, criminals, they'd have to be awfully dumb to try and break into City Hall to try and steal all of this important confidential information. When, you know, excuse the colloquialism, when the cop shop is sitting right next door, it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, what has happened to cause people in City Hall to think that they need protection from $87,000 worth of doors that they don't get from armed police officers like across the way from them. It just is puzzling to me. Thank you.
We do not have any more online public comment.
Mr. Mogensen, would you summarize what this item is about?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I want to say it was a couple of years ago now. Our Joint Powers Insurance Authority, who does all our risk management stuff, did a walk of City Hall and told us where all the security weak points were and stuff. But one of the this particular thing tonight is roughly just replacing the keyed entries on the exteriors of the building. So instead of using a key, well, you would use a key fob to be able to come in and out of the building. And the benefit of that is that with a key, every time somebody either becomes an employee or leaves an employee, you know, you exchange keys and you don't always get the keys back. If keys are lost, if they're stolen, you know, different reasons like that. So it's a way for the key fobs, you can just turn them on and off and you don't have to, if somebody shouldn't be here anymore, they can no longer get in the building. So that's primarily what this item is. This doesn't replace doors or anything. It's just an electrical or a magnetic thing that lets you in and out of the doors.
I'll add that when I was gainfully employed probably 25, 30 years ago, they went to key fobs or card keys, right? And we all go to hotels now, and that's the standard. And there's more security, as you just described, with a card key. They can be turned on and off at will. So it's more secure for the people with access to the doors to come into the building when it's supposed to be locked. Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you. I guess my question is, and I can understand, the need for security, but how is the public going to be able to access City Hall during normal business hours? Will those doors be open? Or how does that, or you just disable the readers? How is the public going to maintain, get access to City Hall?
Those are great questions. It's as far as the time control, yes, they can be programmed, to be able to turn on and turn off different times of the day. But the main access points that we have today are still going to be the access points during business hours. That's the primary still, thing we have to provide here is access to the public. It'll just be a different way of locking the doors for the most part. And there has been discussion, I understand, over the years about certain wings of the building, perhaps having a little bit different process of people setting appointments or something. If somebody just works there all by themselves all day long, for a little bit, there's not buddies around, to help with some of that security. But I would say for the 99%, it's still going to be the same access as people have today.
Okay, so during normal business hours, the public can expect to enter the buildings just like they have in the past. Okay. One thing that the caller did mention was a site security assessment, which is referenced in the agenda report. And I know we went out for an RFQ on that back in January. I don't know if the council ever received a copy of that assessment. So maybe we could link to it on the agenda report, just so the public will at least have an idea what the assessment was. And if it's already been provided, that's fine. I just don't recall. Because the RFQ went out in January, so perhaps it did come back. At any rate, we might want to link to it in this agenda report is all. Thank you.
Yeah, or put it, if not, put it in upcoming agenda, just as a received report. But I think we did. I'm sorry, my memory is a little faulty on that one. Any other discussion, Councilmember Dory?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick thing. I would say that this would also, hopefully, because everything is electronic, would also produce reports to say who's actually entering the premises, key fob or not, which will allow us to control things better. I had a question. The contract looked like had a Bluetooth kind of access available too, and I think we're signing on for Bluetooth access too, which is how like hotels operate these days. I assume that's the case, right?
Unfortunately, I was not involved in the technical aspects of this contract, and the employee is out today. But we can get back to you with the answers.
I'm generally supportive, so we're good. Thanks.
About a motion?
Recommended action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we're now moving on to item 11A. Mr. Mogensen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this presentation will be provided by Letitia Livian.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, staff, and members of the public. City Council approved a 3% cost of living adjustment and market adjustment for certain classifications last year for employee groups, which included the General Employee Association, the Management Employee Association, non-represented management, and confidential and department head groups. Salary increases for these groups span over 3 fiscal years. This is the second increase in the series for the fiscal year 24-25. In order to make the administrative change and revise the salary schedule, council must approve the salary schedule by ordinance. Therefore, tonight staff is requesting approval of a salary schedule amendment by ordinance to incorporate the salary increases approved last year by council for this fiscal year. This concludes my report.
Any public comment? Please come forward. Virtual public comment.
We do not have any virtual public comment.
Council discussion. Councilmember Cleddy.
Thank you. As mentioned, Letitia, as mentioned in the agenda report, these increases were authorized by council back in 2023. September for the GEA, November for the MEA. Did those go into effect for that current year, the fiscal year 23-24 as well?
Yes, that is correct. There was an increase in 23-24. I believe it was retro back to, I want to say, beginning of July. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. And then this would be the second 3% increase for fiscal year 24-25.
Did we do an ordinance for that?
Yes,
adjusting?
yes, we did.
Okay, so are we gonna have to do another ordinance next year?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I got.
I think there was, I had heard someone ask the question, if we're doing multiple years, could we do one ordinance to cover future years? But that, I'm guessing that's probably not practical. You can't bind a future council. Is that right?
I can look into that. I guess it depends on whether or not there'd be any changes from one year to the next.
Okay, no, please don't take any action on that. Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
I'm prepared to ask the city attorney to read the title of the ordinance.
Excuse me, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Pacific Grove, amending the classification schedule.
And I'll then move items 2 through 4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We're on to item 12A, outside dining parklets. Mr. Mogensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We pull up a couple of slides. I will introduce this by not getting into the second item yet, but just saying this item somewhat is a partner with the second item. And we're going to try and step through this, so that we can not confuse the whole situation too much. But we've placed things in this order, and hopefully it somewhat makes sense to try and walk through some of that progression of decisions. This is not a new issue or a new conversation, as everyone is aware. But we're hoping that tonight is not going to be any of your final decisions, but this will be the next step in the process to move us forward to get towards that final decision. So with that, the first item tonight, if you don't mind changing it, it really is trying to determine two different things. There's a coastal development permit question about three parklets that currently exist in the coastal zone down on Central Avenue. And the question that we're going to ask is the council interested in waiving fees for those? And then we'll talk about a little bit more about it in a second. And the second part is helping us to determine the scope of this outside dining manual, as we're calling it now, instead of parklets, because it's kind of more encompassing of it all, so that we can get the proper proposal and get a contract back before you so we can start developing that. Next, please. So I mentioned that there's three parklets that we've discovered are in the coastal development zone. And the name of the businesses associated with that are Happy Girl Cafe. That was developed in 2014, and it predates the city's LCP. But there's El Vecchio, which is developed circa 2022. I believe that's the right year, around there. But it is permitted during the COVID declaration. And then Vivolo's Chowder House was also permitted at the same time during the emergency declaration. And during that time, we didn't have to exercise the CDP requirements. So that is one of the reasons why those don't currently have a CDP. So the plan going forward is we're going to need to come up with a way to bring these three into compliance within 90 days. And what we say, just to start the process, is what we're really looking for, which will be the submittal of an application, any plans that are necessary, and then the fees being addressed one way or another. Next, please. So I mentioned that Happy Girl Cafe was developed in 2014, and the history behind that, there's a report attached to the staff report that talks about this was really a city-sponsored project when theirs was developed. And the city was looking to develop an additional 3 around the city. Happy Girl was the only one that was interested at the time, and the city participated in developing that one. The all the city's parklet encroachment permits do have a provision that they remain open to the public for use, and that's also something that's important in the coastal development permit requirements. So I thought I'd just point that out. Next, please. On the CDP application question, the application fee is estimated at about $6,500, and that covers the staff time and the noticing costs roughly. And if I get any of this wrong, Karen will probably come and help correct me on some of that. We also have additional fees that we really can't waive, and those are going to be related to once they submit their application, we analyze it. There could be additional technical studies that are needed, or perhaps additional environmental analysis is needed, and that could then raise the costs. And those are things that we can't necessarily waive. So the options for the council's consideration here, again, is that the business owner would pay all the fees, or that the council is interested in waiving the application portion of the fee, which is $6,500. Next, please. So the second big question for this item on the agenda has to do with this outside dining manual, and again, the scope of what's included within it. So an outside dining manual, as we're seeing it, it includes the city or property owned by the city that's on the sidewalks, in parking lots, because we do have ones in a city-owned parking lot, and then on-street parking stalls. And for the purpose of this, those are the ones we're considering parklets, the ones that are on-street parking stalls. This does not include the outside dining you might see on private property. So if you see that at the sushi restaurant on Central, that's on their private property, it wouldn't be included within these regulations. Our municipal code currently allows for the issuance of an encroachment permit to be used for this outside dining in general. But that's kind of where it stops. It is supposed to be, we're supposed to issue permits in conjunction with this parklet program, which we're working on here to get developed. So we have a little more guidance. Next, please. So the options of the menu, if you will, to help us work through this a little bit is would like some feedback and discussion on, and possibly a motion, and includes 4 different pieces for the most part. And that is our existing sidewalks that are out there today. And those are, some of them do have seating on them. So we want to come up with some standards of how people can place tables, pass the travel, they got to leave open, things like that. The next category would be an extended bulb out sidewalk on intersection corners, and that's going to be discussed in item 2 tonight that we talked about. But that would be the scenario where it's a wider sidewalk on the corners that provide for more seating on that area. The other category is the city-owned parking lots, and we do only have the one currently. And then the last one is parking stall parklets in city streets. So this is kind of how we're seeing these different categories. So an existing sidewalk dining is usually like an 8 to 15 foot sidewalk type area. I might be off a foot or 2, but that's estimated kind of the area. These would what we'd be looking for to create in this manual would be standards that are, and maybe some graphic examples of how they can use this space, again, to fit within code requirements and things like that, but also give it the look and the feel that we want. It's also going to address, like I mentioned, sidewalk clearances, the use of heaters, barriers, any landscaping amenities and things like that they would add to it. As far as in these smaller ones, the awnings and different architectural features of the building could really be permitted within our zoning code requirements today, because there are some ability, there are architectural review permits to make changes to the front of buildings that could probably encompass these existing sidewalks. We don't need a larger piece to it. Next, please. The bulb out sidewalks is this other category, and these are going to be sidewalks that they're probably between like 16 and 27 feet wide, and they can be different as we in the future as we do different bulb outs down the street. Each corner is different. So these will again include some of those graphics, and we'll also have the same items as the sidewalk dining, but we'll also be looking at kind of standards for like larger awnings and structures that would provide some kind of protection, the ability to put heaters and electrical work and landscaping. And these will be permitted through the encroachment permit and just building permit process. They wouldn't be something under the zoning code because they're entirely on public property. Next, please. I mentioned, the citywide or the city-owned parking lots, and we do have the one, and, so there's some things we probably would want to think about, and that's how these parking lots still flow and work. Should these parking lots be arranged in a way so the traffic can still work within there and we have accessible parking provisions, and so that would be this category if we chose to include this in the manual. The last category again are the parking stall parklets, and I think we probably talked about these standards would entail quite a bit as well. But this is going to be one or more curbside parking spaces. It's going to have standards for dimension sizes, the materials that can be used, all that's, that's the things that make it more aesthetically pleasing to the people who use it and also safe. These would be also permitted through an encroachment permit and building permit process. And I'm not saying that at the end of the day, this manual would say that that's exactly how you permit them, but it's going to be something to that liking. There might be a design review piece of it that staff looks at as well. Next one, please. So it is hard to have this conversation without thinking about, the corner that we're also going to talk about in the next one. And in that item, we're talking about creating a bulb out sidewalk, which doesn't exist today. Because this is going to be a larger manual, with all these pieces in it, it's going to take a little time to develop this and do it well, and have the public input that we want, the business meetings, and really work through this. So what we're proposing is perhaps we start this out and laying out priorities. What do we want to accomplish first? And the first one being, again, these bulb out areas to address. Once that's constructed, what can the restaurant do exactly within this space? And what are the standards that we want to employ? The next seems like more important thing would be the existing sidewalk configuration ones. And that's because we have a number that exist today and we don't have any standards really to apply to those. The city-owned parking lots, if we decide we want to, that almost seems interchangeably between that one and the parking stall parklets in terms of if we want to go on to develop standards just for those. There's within all of these different things, there's obviously a number of options, and we really want to hear from the council on what you choose on those. But overall, next slide, please. So overall, what we're really hoping to answer are these questions here, and that's, do we want to waive fees on the CDP ones? And they're still going to be costs, and there's going to be impacts on the business. It's unfortunate, but it's in the coastal zone, and it's been brought to our attention, so we will have to take them through that process. And the second one is what should be in this outside dining manual? Should it be all these components? And do you agree with sort of the phasing program that we talked about in developing it? If the council, gives us direction on putting together the final proposal, provided that the contract comes back under $40,000, if it's all meeting our needs, we wouldn't have to necessarily come back to council. But if it's over 40,000, which probably will be, we'll be back with a contract for the council to approve at one of our next meetings. And then over the next 3 months, we'll kick off the process of outreach to the businesses and coming back and talking to the council about, these concepts kind of along the right lines, and checking in and doing the full kind of public review process. So that's it.
Thank you. Public comment on this item, please come forward. Yes, the podium's on your right. There's a microphone. Yes, please. So you're recorded, your comments. Welcome.
Owner of El Vecchio on Central Avenue. So this is all pretty new to me, especially the idea of the Coastal Commission being part of our restaurant. So I'm not really sure what the I understand the point to this in kind of making rules and regulations for safety and things like that, but to have a large $6,500 fee for something like that is just ridiculous. I don't understand why it has to be that much. We already pay, I guess, about $1,000 a year for the parklet that we have now. And, it just, I would love to see someone organize all of this, but if it takes, $40, $50, $60,000 just to get all this regulated, I don't think we should have to pay for that. you know, that's about all I want to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Welcome.
Liz Jacobs, owner of Wildfish Restaurant. Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, Mr. Morganson, for bringing forward the progress on this. And as always, you know, I've been wanting to work with the city on this and have had a lot of conversations. And, you know, I hope, you know, we're going forward in a productive way. What I find really hopeful is that you wish to have a manual that specifies the I don't know, the dimensions, the safety features, everything that we need. It's been unclear, I think, in several of the discussions of whether it's just outside dining, kind of just a metal open fence with tables on cement, or whether we can have the amenities that I think all the restaurant owners pretty much are going to say are needed, which would be windbreaks so that outside dining is comfortable because it is Pacific Grove and it's cool at night. We do need features like heating and lighting. And I think most people, they have some form of overhead protection as well. So that's another consideration. And you know, we look forward to having, you know, the things that we feel that we need for the comfort of the diners, because with the big price tag on this, and I realize for me, it's kind of hard to, I think, also to evaluate and assess what, you know, whether I'm, you know, want to go forward with it personally. For me to understand it, I don't understand the cost of it very well because it is, you know, a citywide program, and there are 11 parklets, and I think we all need to know what, you know, from the get-go before we start tearing down parklets, like what, you know, what is everyone's situation going to be, and what will we all be permitted to have for comfortable outside dining. So I just am urging you to bear that in mind, that it's foremost, I think, for the restaurant owners and certainly for customers and, you know, for the success of outdoor dining. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Virtual comment?
Ms. Dahmer?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think we all have to remember that these parklets were created on an emergency situation. That all these ordinances and all these things, it was a COVID thing. Now, Happy Girl Kitchen wasn't. That was our city manager at the time, who very much pushed this economic development, and they did a GoFundMe and did whatever. However, the 3 parklets in the coastal zone have been taking up space right around the corner from me. Yes, parking, space, visibility, and have not had permits for them. Coastal development permits, which every coastal development, I mean, we don't have that much of a coastal zone, but believe me, every single one of us needs to adhere to that. And as far as the city paying for their permits, thank you, no. I am very much against that, as they have been taking up this space and greatly interfering with the Central and Erdley intersection for a lot of years here. And unfortunately, the new owners are, you know, the old chef that bought back El Vecchio. I'm sorry, that is one of the most problematic on the north side as you enter Pacific Grove. And in fact, it's the only one that was ever hit by a truck. And, you know, I mean, and they don't really have tables in there. It's kind of a holding zone for inclement weather for the people wanting to get inside. I mean, I don't really see it at that beautification project to our city of absolutely narrowing that street. And here we have a parklet there. The ones on the south side are not as problematic, the Happy Girl and the Vivalos, but let's face it, they've been writing on taking up these spaces for a long time with just an encroachment permit. And I'm sorry, all the rest of us in the coastal zone with needing CDPs pay fees. I do not believe the city should take them over. As far as the manual goes, oh, please, it is very much we need an outside consultant to consult with all the groups and come up with a viable, workable manual with design standards, because we haven't had any really. They were piecemeal put together. It's an absolutely absurd standards for parklets. And if we're going to make them permanent, as the restaurant owners want and certain members of the public want, then please let's spend the money on a consultant and do it. Thank you very much.
Lisa Siani.
Thank you. First about the CDP fee, the Coastal Development Permit fee. I mean, there is a lot of work to be done for that in terms of the planning and dealing with the parking and what the rules are in the coastal zone. On the other hand, there needs to be some motivation for staff to learn where the coastal zone is and what's required in the coastal zone. We've had our LCP for 4 years. So I don't know how you get things going on that, but that's really a big priority. And so, you know, these 3 parklets, well, they're in a what would you call it? Privileged part of town in the coastal zone, and it provides more complications. So I don't know. The easy answer from my point of view is just make it 50-50. The city waives 50% of the fee, because they should have told the parklet owners before they invested in their parklet that would be a part of the cost. But and then about the manual, I just remembering how much work the Planning Commission's subcommittee did on studying the whole parklet situation, and they wrote a detailed document, and I would hope that they would be involved from the beginning of the development of this manual. So those are my 2 concerns, because outdoor dining's a great thing, but it does present a lot of issues, health and safety issues, and various issues that need to be dealt with. Thank you.
Gordon Champagne. Gordon Champagne. Jordan Champagne.
Jordan, you should be clear to speak now.
We don't have any more speakers.
Right. Unfortunately, we seem to be having technical difficulties. Any other public speakers?
We do not have any other public speakers online.
Council discussion? Well, I'll start off since I didn't see anyone's hand raised. Thank you very much, Mr. Mogensen, for the report on payment for the CDPs, or the fact that we even need CDPs for this. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but they are in the coastal zone and we have to live by state rules. I'm in favor of the city foregoing the fees for these 3 parklets on 2 conditions. One is that the parklets are as is, that they're not going to change the parklets, and so we're permitting the existing structure. So hopefully there doesn't have to be much study as to what structures would be there because it's already there. And the other condition is that the encroachment fee for the next fiscal year is paid for. And if the business owner, it's not worth it to pay the encroachment fee for that property, then there's no reason to go ahead with the CDP. So those are the 2 conditions. On the manual, if you didn't number them, but they were listed in priority order. So yeah, let's do that. And then all council can comment on that priority order. Yeah, oops, that back one. So our city manager knows this already. He just gives us multiple choice questions, so we don't have to. Thank you for that. So I'm good with the top 2. And the fact that on the city-owned parking lots, we only have 1, I believe, that's Peppers, right? And so let's hold on. Let's get the others taken care of for now, and then address the city-owned parking lots later. And in regards to parking stall parklets, I would like to see. Give you my speech now about extended sidewalks and outdoor dining. To me, what we've seen during COVID, and I think this is a continued direction for our downtown, is it creates space for people to gather. And what better reason for them to come downtown is to gather with friends and neighbors to eat. And it can make for a more attractive downtown. With the manual, it sets some standards. So I'd like to see us going forward across town. I think Ms. Jacobs alluded to that already. I've said it too, that this is a concept that over a number of years I'd like to see roll out across downtown, although we're only going to be talking about one intersection or one group of parklets tonight. So I'd like to see the manual have objective standards. Let's not make them subjective in the problems that creates. And I wanted to clarify how this manual is going to be used. I had some ideas, but maybe at first let you speak on that, please.
Mr. Mayor, we haven't thought that far ahead, but generally I think the way it would work is we would have some kind of an application process for a business that wanted to use any of the sidewalk space for their outside So they'd come in and we'd have like some kind of a packet that shows them illustrations, what they can and can't do. And then they would give us a plan. We would look at that plan, it looks consistent, so we would then give them an encroachment permit that fits that. If it comes to on the bulb outs, with the ones that if they want to build a larger canopy or something, that'll take a little bit deeper plans, a little bit, more advanced plannings. And again, I have a feeling we'd probably at least want to set up some kind of a review that goes through the planning department for kind of a design look, if you will, make sure it's still consistent with downtown themes and stuff. That's currently planning. I'm getting a little far ahead because currently planning doesn't necessarily look at things on public property, only on private. So that's a completely different process that we don't currently have. But we probably want to do something again, to kind of make sure that our aesthetics, stay cohesive. And then finally, we would issue them, a permit. And I have a feeling these would not work on an annual basis because if you're building a structure, you're going to want it longer. So it's probably going to be more of a 5-year review or with a bunch of conditions about keeping the aesthetic qualities of it up. If the tarp needs to be replaced, you got to replace the tarp if you're noticed about it. Things like that, to make sure we have some control. I don't know if I've kind of hit on the question or the answer.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And I realize we're both speculating of next steps. So, yeah, I'm definitely supporting what I'll call shelters. I mean, you called it bulb outs. I've heard it called extended sidewalks, like we're going to be talking about the next item. But definitely, we need shelters to make this viable. That's what's happened across town. So I think what I heard you say, which makes sense to me, if it's going to be something simple, like, a few tables and chairs right up against on the sidewalk, but right against the restaurant, the building front, that might be something that's just ministerial, particularly hopefully they're objective standards. So it's pretty cut and dried, simple. But then the other part to be whether it's the ARB or Planning Commission, hopefully not burdening this process a whole lot, but to apply to make sure that our standards are applied and that aesthetics, because this is the look, as you pointed out, long term, right? For years for our downtown. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it comes before a review body, then we need an ordinance.
Yeah, I think we probably want to on this whole thing really think about it carefully how we want to do it because as others would point out quickly that we don't want to go into a discretionary process. We don't mean to because that means different things at times. So we'd want to think about it, and come back with a good proposal or ideas for the council to consider.
So I'm just wondering, I'm looking at our city attorney, is this probably while this manual is underway, we should start thinking about an ordinance. So these pieces come together. We don't have to do them all sequentially, do we?
No, if we identify all that needs to be done, we could be working on some of them simultaneously. And then in terms of an ordinance, it depends on the issue of enforceability. If it's a policy, it's difficult to enforce, but if it's an ordinance, then it would be a code violation.
Well, if it went through a review body, whether it's the ARB or the Planning Commission, that would have to be by ordinance, right? I mean,
Well, I'll have to take a look at your existing ordinance to see what it says. I mean, there may be language in there that's broad enough to encompass it currently, but if it's not, then yes, it would need to be.
all right. Well, I would encourage that that question come back to council while that manual is underway. And my last point, and my colleagues are getting anxious for me to be quiet for a second, is I would like before, and I'm thinking ahead to the next item. Before demolition construction happens on extended bulb out um, sidewalk dining, this needs to be completed. This manual and process needs to be completed. And I think we heard it tonight, and I've mentioned it also. There should be no mystery about where it's going. Once we want to limit the downtime, or I'd like to limit the downtime that any business owner would have when they're taking down the parklet structure and replacing it with sidewalk dining structure. So um, I can bring that back up on the next item, but just let you know, that's where my head's at. Let's start with Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you. I agree with you, Mayor, in regards to waiving the fees um, of the $6,500 and some odd dollars for the businesses. I also think I have to almost reverse the direction. I agree with you that before anything is done, that manual has to be done. Who, what, where, why, asking all the questions, and also include business owners that are restaurant owners that are affected by it. And I'm not saying bring out 14 restaurant owners, but just, have a representative to make it transparent on this particular manual. I think that's very important. And I agree with I'm not going to repeat what the mayor said, that I agree with him on that too. So that's all. I also was going to mention one interesting thing I found out, that there's a new virus coming out on COVID called KP3, and it's up 25% in the United States right now. And that came out, and that was up to June 8th. And that's on a website I got. So hopefully it's not going to go full blast like the last COVID, but it's still out there. Anyway, I agree with the mayor.
Councilmember Beck.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I'd like to say I will be recusing myself from 12B. However, discussing 12A, I'm in favor of waiving the coastal fee as well. However, I'm not in favor of the one condition you mentioned, that the outdoor dinings are to remain the same, because once the manual comes out, there will be guidelines. I would assume they'd have to go by those guidelines. So I would not be in favor of that one condition, but I am in favor of waiving. I am a little disappointed that, it's been 2 years since the Planning Commission brought their 80-page report together. And it feels like we have never been able to come to terms with everybody to make this happen. I know even city staff has worked on a parklet program manual that was very vague, in my opinion. I think the Planning Commission, yes, I was on that subcommittee, and I think it was a very thorough report. But I think what's most important is we all enjoy outdoor dining. We've all been very clear about that. But there needs to be guidelines, and I'm really disappointed we haven't had clear guidelines to this point. Many have been sitting as parklets for 4 years now. We get letters from the community where there's violations, and there's no follow through. So I think, we've allowed outdoor dining for 4 years, but I think going forward, if there's any, concerns from residents, any violations, anything like that, that we, as a city, we do need to address that. Again, I think having a manual, putting it together has been extremely important from day one, and making it very thorough. And again, it is city property. And so I do think getting the restaurateurs, even though several have been involved up to this point, that getting them involved is extremely important. But at the end of the day, this is a permanent, forever configuration that we're going to be creating for our community. What we currently have is temporary. They have been temporary for 4 years. So I'm looking forward to something that will still be here in 50 years, that still is attractive to our community, has safety issues for our community, and that is truly a historical downtown, which is what our community is truly all about. So again, I'm in favor of waiving the fee. I'm not in favor of the one condition that those parklets are to remain as they are, because once the manual is produced, I think they have to come forward just like all the other parklets. Thank you.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I'll agree with my colleague, Councilmember Beck about that. I think if we are going to develop a set of guidelines and standards, they need to apply to everybody. And it is kind of a little bit of a chicken before the egg kind of a situation here, where we're trying to get a CDP approved based on current implementation, current build of the parklet, and then there's the opportunity to change it. We're kind of in a bit of a bind here. So you mentioned 90-day. Is that based on the streamlined permitting for a CDP? Is that where that 90-day comes in?
The 90 days is just a code enforcement tactic, if you will, to bring them into compliance, giving them enough time to be able to get their plans and everything together and submit to start the process.
Okay. Well, I don't think we can hold them to the current standard, which is no standard. They were just built however they wanted to build them. I think that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. But I guess I could go along with waiving fees in this particular case. Regarding the slide that we have up when we're looking at the project phasing, I agree with the priority list. I think we do need to do extended sidewalks and the existing sidewalk configuration first, as far as developing the standards for that, so that we can get on with removing the parklets there at Fountain and Lighthouse and go with the extended sidewalk. And I don't think that's going to be as heavy a lift as some might think, because the city in the past developed an entire ordinance around sidewalk dining, and then the council removed that as part of adopting the update to Title 15. So we can easily go back, is my suggestion, and that went through at least 2 or 3 iterations, that code, and then include some of the requirements we're going to need for extended sidewalks, such as I would call them light shelters. We're not interested in having people increase their square footage, as if it were just additional, extension of the building, but there are light footprint shelters that could be implemented, awnings with some light walls, et cetera. And I think that needs to be definitely pursued as part of developing the manual, and the priority being these first 2 items in that manual. We do have to be very careful with creating vested rights, though. And our current program, which is for the encroachment permitting, is very similar to how we license STRs. I wouldn't want to get away from an annual license, because then we have the potential of perhaps creating a vested right where we shouldn't be. We own the sidewalk. We should be licensing the use on an annual basis. And we're definitely going to need legal review of that. But that would be my preference. I was a little unclear where the mayor actually was going when he was saying what his vision for downtown was. Is your vision for more outside dining or more parklets? I'm not sure where your vision was on that.
It was that eventually parklets would be phased out, and we would have what's called bulb out, or I've called extended sidewalk dining.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's kind of where I'm at as well. I think we can get there. I think a lot of the sidewalk dining provisions have already been, we already developed those back in 2015, 2014. They were removed from our current municipal code, but we can put those back in. And then all we have to do is think about some of these light footprint structures that can provide some shelter. And then we're there. This really doesn't have to be that heavy of a lift. And as Councilmember Beck said, we've been at this for 2 years. Council gave direction in May of 2022 to develop standards when we adopted the last temporary ordinance for allowing outside dining. And we all know the history since then. So I have full faith that city manager, city attorney, and their staff can get this over the finish line. I think we're on the 95-yard line. We just need to get that last few yards, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
It's a 5-yard line on both sides of the field, Luke. You should know that.
A good flag.
Okay, anyway, thank you, Your Honor. I'm in agreement with the mayor as well as Luke on the vision, removing the existing structures and creating a more extended outdoor dining program. So I'm definitely in favor of that. As far as the project phasing, I think I understand what we're trying to get at here. Definitely the orders are, I would say, correct. I'm not, I think this applies, does this apply to the manual creation or? Okay, yeah, so I like the order of it. I think we do need to address all 4 of them at some point, because, you know, it may not be as big of a lift as it's kind of been suggested. I think it's maybe not as big of a lift as some might think. And so I think we can get it done if we make a concerted effort as a staff to do that. Let's see. And then the other item, sorry, there was a secondary item, Your Honor, would you remind me of the? Oh, the waiver. And that, if it's the 3 that are already in the zone, I could see waiving. I would be okay with that. Because they've been there a long time, so it's kind of a gotcha moment. So that's fine with me. Thank you.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I know we've been impatient to get the manual going too, so I'm glad to see that's moving forward, because I agree that's really important that the business owners know what they're looking at so they can be planning before we start with the process of the construction. So I'm really glad that this is moving forward. And to Councilmember Coletti's point, we do have a lot of that done already. We have what the Planning Commission worked on previously. We have the prior documentation, and I appreciated that you said that would be with public input, because I always think it's important to do a needs assessment and know what people need to have it be a workable solution. And so I'm glad to see it's moving forward. We're getting the definitions that we need, and as we've always said, we want a shelter for sure. That's, you know. And to Councilmember Emilio's point, there are still a lot of people concerned about eating indoors. So I like that it provides options. It provides an area like the mayor mentioned where people can gather, enjoy the space. So I think it just it brings a lot of life to downtown, and this gives us what we need as far as the guidelines for making that happen in an effective way. I'd be inclined to agree that waiving the fees makes sense largely, well, especially for Happy Girl, because they had theirs before we even had the CDP. But I think to the mayor's point, the idea being that the CDP would be for their current footprint, I'm assuming, and this may need some clarification, it would be for their current footprint, but as we came up with the new guidelines, modifying like accoutrements or whatever that might be that goes with that, would that still be allowed, or would that require an additional permit review?
If it's okay, I think I'm going to ask Director Vaughn to help me out with that question a little bit, because that is a good question. If the
Thanks.
footprint has to remain stable, or if we can alter that.
Good evening, Mayor Peak and council members. Karen Vaughn, Community Development Director. I think we can work with the business owners on developing what their project description would be. I think the main parameters, like you mentioned, would be footprint,
kind of square footage, height, the things that would matter in terms of a coastal development permit. But we could leave some flexibility in there so that when the manual is developed and adopted, they could modify their parklet to become in compliance with the manual design guidelines, but not have to go through an additional discretionary permitting process.
Okay, great, because that would be my concern if they then had to go through the whole process again, and then the timing might be an issue, because if this was coming soon, do we need to pause on that? But it sounds like if we can move forward, then that would make sense to do that, so we're in compliance since we've been out of compliance for a couple of years already. It definitely makes sense to get back in compliance. So yeah, so thank you so much for bringing this forward. I'm happy that we finally feel like we have some clearer direction that really lets the businesses know where they stand and how they can start moving forward and planning. And I think that's a critical item. And so, yeah, I'm in support. Thank you.
Councilmember Paduri.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Matt, for putting this in a presentation, because when I first read the agenda item, it was kind of complicated, just put it that way. This kind of helps. And I would say in general, I'm in agreement with what the mayor proposed. I had a question for you with relation to the waiver. You had mentioned that there was going to be additional fees that could potentially crop up after discussions with the Coastal Commission. Does this waiver imply we're waiving all fees from now on?
Councilmember, I'm gonna defer again to Ms. Vaughn because she handles this every day.
No, I think what we're proposing this evening is the waiver of the city's permit fees and the associated noticing we would still do the noticing per the CDP requirements, but we just wouldn't charge the applicant for that. So it's only the waiving of the fees associated with the application. Once we receive an application and begin our analysis, if we determine that there are certain technical analysis or technical reports that we need, or if there's additional environmental analysis that's required under CEQA, and we would need those reports to be prepared and submitted by the applicant, they would have to cover the costs of those.
Okay, all right, and thank you for that explanation, and hopefully that will be communicated to the all the owners, etc., whoever is responsible for this, that we're waiving the fees, but there may be potential fees in the future.
Yeah.
So when I read this item, I was just trying to prepare what needs to be happening, and I was just looking at it from a we're going out to have someone hired to do a parklet manual. And broadly speaking, I'm with the mayor, which is that we need to have objectives, and that those objectives need to be in the manual. And ideally, my objectives, I have a long list of objectives here. You can consider them goals too. But to me, primarily, I'm looking for making, I would say from a traffic standpoint, I want like a slowing down of traffic. It's like one of the big things that I want for downtown is slowing down traffic, making sure that we're creating a vibrant downtown. We're promoting walking, and we're promoting items such as non-motorized and multimodal activity. We're making it ADA accessible. We're supporting the local businesses, and we're making like things like public seating, landscaping, public art, bike parking. So there are a lot of elements in here. And I think our objectives or like goals need to be in that parklet manual so that whoever is building or redeveloping the parklet is looking at those objectives to meet those. So just FYI. But one of the things that I am a proponent for is that I don't believe in light shelters, especially in Pacific Grove, because of the elements that are here. And that could include there's always like wind. I always wear a jacket outside no matter what. For example, there's an element of rain. And what I like personally is, and so this can or cannot happen, but in addition to sheltering the elements, I'm looking for something like a green roof, so that if we're looking objectively in the future, that this green roof could potentially address drainage systems and anything else that we are incorporating in those parklets. So altogether, though, but I'm supportive of how this is being phased out. But I think when we're reaching out to whoever it is that's going to develop the parklet manual, I do want to see those objectives listed out right in front. But thank you.
Okay, that's a lot of feedback. I think what I heard was unanimous um, approval to waiving the 6525 CDP fee, and I'm crossing all my fingers that the environmental impact between parked cars and a temporary or a structure doesn't require a long, expensive study. Um, but I'm less clear. I think I'm hearing that the priority that was set to us is good, but I'm hearing differences of opinion as to what should be tackled now. Your thoughts? What have you heard? Um,
I haven't put numbers to my notes in terms of, but I also kind of heard that it sounded like there was definitely support for 1 and 2 in this proposal that we request. But perhaps 3 and 4, I'm not sure there's an unanimous decision on that. And one of the things I just wanted to throw out there in kind of coming to some consensus on that is that we could proceed today with just getting a proposal for 1 and 2, or the first 2 bullet points. And then if you wanted to, next, I don't know, once we got close to finishing up the sidewalk, say it's next spring or it's winter time this year, we could work on the next phase of it if you still wanted to think about adding the parklets. And again, the parklets is only going to be for the ones that are existing in parking stalls. So I think the bigger question is, well, and maybe a little bit too big of a policy question tonight, is do we want to allow for new ones? Because if you don't want to allow for new ones, you're basically just redesigning for the existing ones you have.
Councilmember Cleddy, I'm wondering if we should get some opinions on that question, even though it's
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Before that though, I wanted to follow up with Ms. Vaughn about the coastal commission. What's been the communication with them thus far? What are they telling us we need to do?
I'm not aware that there's been any communication. As was mentioned in the report, the Happy Girl parklet went into place back in 2014 under a pilot program. And that predated the city's LCP. And then the other 2 on Central came in during the COVID emergency measures. And those emergency ordinances allowed the city to bypass some processing requirements.
So,
So,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I don't believe that there's been any communication thus far.
So are we even sure we need a CDP? Can this be done through a waiver, or what's informing us that we have to issue a coastal development permit?
So we received a complaint from a member of the public asking about the 3 parklets on Central Avenue and whether or not they had coastal development permits. Upon checking, all 3 of them are in the coastal zone. And in just a cursory review of what would qualify for a waiver or an exemption, it didn't appear to me that these would qualify, that they would require a coastal development permit. And what's a bit unique is the coastal zone along Central Avenue extends to the land side right-of-way line of Central Avenue. So for the Chowder House and for Happy Girl, their private property is outside of the coastal zone. It's the city's right-of-way that's in the coastal zone. And so I can't speak to what was done in the past, but that may have created some confusion if somebody called and gave the property address and it was checked and they were told, no, you're not in the coastal zone.
Yeah.
Right. So there may have been some confusion just because of where that line falls in terms of the private property versus the city's right of way.
Right, where you draw the line. I've heard it was the middle of the street when we're going through our LCP review, but you're saying it's face of curb on the south side.
It's the right of way line on the south side. Yes.
Well, so devil's advocate here, go to the coastal zone or go to the coastal commission and start asking about this. Are they likely to say, hey, we don't care about individual sites. We want to see you develop an actual program for parklets? as an amendment to your LCP. Is that how you think this could go?
Well, the city has the authority to issue coastal development permits because we have the certified LCP.
No, I understand, but for a
Um,
park, for an actual parklet program.
For a program that would partially exist within the coastal zone, that would probably be a better long-term solution. Because if it's a goal that the city wants to have in terms of vibrant outdoor sidewalk spaces within our commercial zones, I always say, you zone for what you want and you incentivize what you really want. And if we want to create these outdoor dining or parklet situations in the coastal zone, it would be a better practice to develop a program, try to include that in our LCP, get it certified through the Coastal Commission, and then we don't have to go through these individual permits on a business by business basis.
That's where I was headed, whether we want to do this piecemeal through individual CDPs or an actual LCP amendment.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the only issue here is that we have 3 existing. We now know that they're not in conformance.
Right.
And going through the development of a program and LCP amendments through the Coastal Commission would probably be a minimum, best case scenario, a year, maybe more.
Understood. I just was trying to get a forecast where this might end up going. To get back to your point, Mayor, about whether we may place a cap on any new parklets, I think we should, because I think the lesson learned here, and I provided the city manager with a list of every meeting that the city has had regarding outside dining and parklets, and it's a pretty long list. And the lesson learned is once you allow them, clawing it back it's a Herculean effort. So I say we do place a cap on it, get this manual going, especially as regards the first 2 items. And, it's also going to be able to test drive the vendor we're going to select to do the manual. Let's see how they do on the first 2 items before we say, move on to the others. So I think we should do a cap. I think we should get started on the manual for these first 2 items listed in this project phasing slide.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I'd be inclined to agree with that because obviously the first one, as you put it, first priority is obviously most important because this is what is very timely. We need to have that part done before we start with the construction. So that'll be critical to do that one first. And I think if the goal is to go towards the sidewalk dining, it makes sense to cap the parklets where they are, and any new ones coming in would be the ones that we would start phasing into the bulb out or sidewalk dining categories. I mean, that seems to make the most sense. So the existing parklets are kind of existing under the structure that was there before. We may be able to utilize the guidelines we already had. We have a combination of what was already in effect that was pulled out so that we could do it in a plan that just hasn't quite happened yet, and what the Planning Commission worked on. So I think with that, we may already have enough information for the parklets, at least. I'm not sure if we really addressed the city-owned parking lot much because it was kind of the anomaly. But I would definitely agree as well that maybe if we decide on the first 2 for now, and especially number 1, because that's time critical. Obviously, number 2 is less time critical, but they work together. My only question regarding that, I actually like what Councilmember Coletti mentioned, is find out how they do on the first 2 and then go from there. My only question would be, would it be less expensive to do it as a single package than to try and put it as 2 separate things? You'd think if you went with the same group and you just asked them to add on to it, it wouldn't be like a whole nother project, but just curious about your thoughts on that in case there were any cost savings on.
That's a really good question. We do have the consultant on the line who could maybe help a little bit. She's not going to be in a position to give us a price, but kind of intuitively, I'd also say that parking stall parklets are very different from sidewalk dining. That I almost think that you're not going to gain a lot of efficiencies by doing those 2 things together. It's still kind of 2 separate analysis you're going to have to do.
And that does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like me to ask the consultant as well, or?
Would anyone find that helpful? I think we're okay because I think that makes a good point. And kind of like I mentioned, and others have as well, we do actually have those guidelines in existence if we were to pull those back in. And we may find that that would be easier to implement just to kind of maintain the current ones until they get phased into the new program. So I would agree that the first two are really the important ones at this point. Thanks.
Councilmember Paduri.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to understand the question again. The question is, can we have new parklets moving forward generally across the city? Is that the question? Yeah. Okay, and I'm in favor of that. I don't see a reason why not. I also think that anytime a new parklet comes in, it'll potentially go through the motions and it'll probably come to council before the parklet is actually authorized. So we will have enough purview over the entire process. It has to go through the design process. It has to go through the boards. It'll go through the entire process. It'll be vetted out and then it'll be permitted. And I think we can take an action at that point in time, whether we allow it or not. So I'm in favor of generally making it like open. And I think that also, at the end of the day, I would say between parking and parklets, I prefer parklets. And that's because it does bring in visitors to town. It does bring in revenues to town, and that's what we need to focus on. It also helps create, I would say, bring in safety elements. If we put in the right kind of requirements in, it will also create a more vibrant atmosphere throughout the town. So I would say no cap, but hopefully the process involves decision points at every step before new parklet is actually authorized to build it.
Councilmember Emilio and then Councilmember.
Just real quick, I agree with Councilmember Paduri. I don't think we need to shut the city of Pacific Grove down on parklets. I think what we should tell the quote new parklets that there is a manual coming out and place them in the queue to let them know that, hey, if there's any new ones, I'm not familiar with any personally, but in case someone happens to open up a new business or something and wants to put it in, we're waiting for the manual and it'll be in the queue. That's about it.
Councilmember Beck.
Thank you, Your Honor. I feel like we're writing the manual now. Seriously, but Councilmember Dury says, bring people into our community and he'd prefer parklets over parking, but when they come into our community, they have to park somewhere or they've arrived somehow. And again, for someone who pays for parking on an annual basis, because there is no parking in the streets in downtown and I spend every day in downtown, again, I am just in favor of having parking for those businesses, not necessarily restaurants, but any business so that the visitors can find a place to park. And I think you'll find in the Planning Commission 80-page report that we discussed about biking and having more bike racks and those type of things. But again, I think we're getting off topic and we are trying to create a manual right now. And I think we just need to move on these items. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Okay, I had a long speech planned, but Councilmember Beck had to put a pin in that. No, I'm just kidding. So here, I really think that we do need to freeze it because I think we're kind of getting lost in this discussion a little bit because it's a lot of concepts in one item, which obviously we all knew that coming in, and so I think that we do need to freeze on the parklets right now because what we're trying to address is they're in the street right now, they're in the sidewalk right now, or I'm sorry, in the parking spots right now in the stalls. And that's why we've had all this stuff happen the last 2 years. So I think we got to freeze it as it is now and then work on the regulations in order to either reposition them, build the sidewalk, whatever it is we're going to do. We got to stop, freeze, and say, okay, well, if we allow another wooden structure to come in, I mean, that would just we'd be not doing a service to the community in my mind. So I think we do need to stop it, think about what we're doing, and that's what we're doing with this item tonight and the next one. So then once we get that direction, we'll be able to move forward in the most informed manner possible without creating additional problems that we didn't actually foresee tonight.
Well, I guess it is maybe a philosophical question for tonight about freezing or not parklets unless there's somebody that wants new parklets. Are you aware anybody's approached City Hall wanting to put up a parklet?
I am not, Mr. Mayor, and perhaps, so in asking the question, I was kind of getting back to the point of, do we want to scope in our agreement the design of the parklets? Or do we just want to say the ones we have, we're fine with and we're not going to redesign them? It'll change the scope of the agreement that I get with the consultants.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Okay, I think, what I heard was there was agreement on the first two items.
I'm sorry, I'll correct myself really quickly. Director Vaughn says we have had inquiries about additional parklet structures.
Wow. Okay, well, maybe this question will come back and it won't be philosophical. But in any case, it would come back to council as Councilmember Baduri described, right? Because it is an encroachment. Council has to agree to the encroachment? No, it's not ministerial, is it?
Yes, the encroachment permits are ministerial. In terms of inquiries for new parklets, we've simply been advising those business owners that we needed to wait and get through the council direction on these items before we could even consider issuing an encroachment permit.
All right, well, let's get through that. That's not a question for tonight. Wow, but looks like that's coming down the road very quickly. But I, in terms of the manual, the waiving the fees, yes, that's what I'm hearing. And in terms of the manual, I'm hearing agreement on the first two to go ahead and proceed with that. And we'll tackle the question about the latter two later. That's what I'm hearing. Councilmember Coletti.
Yeah, that agrees. I mean, I'm agreeing with you on that. I think it's also important, though, that we include in the motion that we should freeze. I mean, it's a de facto in place already. And I think staff would probably appreciate guidance on that as far as freeze applications until we actually have a manual.
Maybe we're
The agenda, though.
maybe we're not on the agenda.
I
We're
don't know.
going to have our city attorney weigh in on that.
Well, I wasn't sure if that was a request that would be addressed tonight, or it was just in terms of a potential future agenda item. But the only item that's on for tonight in terms of a recommendation is with respect to the CDP fees and also with respect to the manual. There's a third item under the recommendation, which is to take other action related to this item. So the question of freezing future applications or even current applications, that might be beyond the scope of the existing agenda report. And my advice would be that that be brought back at a future meeting.
Okay, I would, yeah, in terms of it being, I don't know what kind of flexibility you have and being ministerial. I mean, it's not only the use of the space encroachment, right? But it's also construction. So does that,
Yes, and we've been working with those business owners that have inquired. They're aware that the city is looking at putting together a design manual, and they're just in a holding pattern because they agree with the staff guidance that have been provided to them. They don't want to spend the money to construct a parklet, get the additional insurance, liability insurance and everything, and then find out that either they're not allowed to have it or that it doesn't meet the design standards of the forthcoming manual. So at this point, we don't have anybody coming in and demanding to apply and get a parklet. They've just been inquiring on the process and we've been holding them at bay, waiting for the manual.
okay, well, it sounds like certainly the manual and the CDP is a fair amount of work to tackle, and let's hold off on that. Does that sound reasonable on the question about new new parklets.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is completely reasonable. I guess just if it's possible to get at the last question just about, in this contract, we're gonna get with BFS. Do we want to include the design of parking parklets? That would be helpful for us getting that. If we don't, then we'll just do the first two.
Yeah, I'm hearing just agreement on the first two.
Okay.
Okay. Well, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to move recommended action one, or parentheses two, I believe is where we're at. And also, recommended action two.
And what about- Yeah, I second that also.
I think that covers it.
Yep.
Any,
I'll make that a second unless there's something we're missing. Councilmember Pedori.
Can I ask the city manager if you have what you need with that motion?
I believe so. If I could repeat back really quickly, this is what I've
Yes.
heard. That you're interested in waiving the fees for the CDP for the three, and that you're interested in getting a contract going that will address sidewalks and the first two bullet points there. And then potentially in the future, you'll consider doing the other ones. But for now, we're starting with those two.
Okay, I think that,
I would add to that, we keep referring to these as the first two, but you know, we're all seeing the screen in front of us, but perhaps we could be more specific and identify what those first two are. And since I've got the mic, I'll be glad to say that the first two are an extended bulb out sidewalks on intersection corners. And that's the first one. The second is existing sidewalk configuration.
And that's, actually, when I said one, parentheses two, I was talking about just item one. So I'll take your additions to recommended action two and make that my motion. I'll include those if I can get a second.
I got number two. Number two, am I correct? The motion to direct the city manager regarding to hiring a consultant draft manual. Correct? And extending those two areas. Yeah, but okay, that's fine.
is that a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. Deep breath. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We have one last agenda item. Would you like to take a 5-minute break? It is 8 o'clock. Let's take a 5-minute break. Let's please.
I will be leaving because I'm recusing myself from 12B. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Squeeze that, like that last little bit out of the toothpaste.
Recording in progress.
All right, we'll now resume. Please, we're on to item 12B, Lighthouse Avenue Sidewalk Widening Project. Mr. Mogensen.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Go is going to present this item tonight.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor, members of the city council, members of the public. After the previous discussion, this presentation is going to be somewhat redundant and maybe we'll have some items that now have been thrown out the window with the previous discussion. I'm going to go through it and alter it the best I can to make it applicable to the discussion that we just had. So bear with me if you see some dates or some information in this presentation that maybe differs from the discussion we just had. I still want to do the presentation because it still lays out the project. So as I said, for the council members of the public, bear with me as we go through it. And I will, if I see discrepancies, I will discuss it at that time. So we're here tonight to discuss the actual project at Lighthouse at Forest, or excuse me, at Fountain and Lighthouse. So what stemmed the project was that we had these parklets that created a visual block with the crosswalk, and it created a conflict with pedestrians and vehicles. So we needed to do something. So right off the bat, what could we do to make it safer? And I'm showing you this slide because Public Works has removed the crosswalk at Fountain and Lighthouse. We put up, as you can see, that black sign right here. I don't know if my cursor shows up. It does right there, which tells pedestrians to use the crosswalk on the movie theater side, that this is not a safe place to cross, basically. So we've complied with AB 413. And why this is important at the present moment, which is the daylighting bill, where you can't have an obstruction 20 feet as you approach a crosswalk. We've removed the crosswalk, so we are now compliant. Why this is important at the present moment is because now that we've complied, we're buying ourselves time to implement any measures associated with the manuals or this construction. So from a safety standpoint, we've enhanced the safety improvements at this intersection. So what is being proposed? This is an updated rendering versus the one that you see right on the wall, where it has shifted the trees per the direction that was given with the subcommittee and the stakeholders. We've shifted out the light post, and you can see now the fencing. So this is a rendering of what we would like to construct there at the corner of Lighthouse and Fountain. This is basically the civil work that was approved at the city council, the preferred configuration, where we're doing the extension approximately 26 feet from the building, and we're going to carry that all the way through to the theater side. So we have to have a bulb out on both sides of the road. This is what the city council authorized staff to move forward with, the preferred configuration. We took this, and then we've added now the design elements. So this starts talking about how the fencing is configured, where the trees go, where the light's going to be. And we've carried that all the way through the intersection so we can keep those same enhancements on the theater side, a uniformity throughout that whole kind of little corridor or widening project. So we've developed these full set of plans that we could now go out to bid with. They are complete. So why a sidewalk extension? Well, it truly enhances driver and pedestrian visibility. We've eliminated that obstruction in the roadway. It promotes eye contact between the driver and the pedestrian. So now the driver can see the pedestrian and vice versa. That pedestrian can see the driver. It shortened crosswalk lengths to reduce pedestrian exposure. If I'm adding an additional 18 feet on that sidewalk, I've shortened that crosswalk significantly. And then it will improve drainage and our ability to properly maintain the roadway with street sweeping and so on and so forth. So again, this is what's proposed. Now that you've got that vision, right? You've got a pedestrian that wants to cross the road. You've got a vehicle that's approaching. There's no obstructions. They can see each other and they know what each other is going to do. If the pedestrian wants to cross, but they can see that vehicle is not going to stop, they don't cross, they wait, or vice versa. That's what this project aims to do. So I've showed you the civil work, which was that diagram with all the lines and everything on it. We've already presented this budget at $250,000, right? Give or take, and these are estimated. So then what the council asked staff to do was go out and let's get the decorative features. Let's get all of the fencing done. What's it going to cost to demo the existing parklets? How much is it going to be to install lighting, the trees, any contingencies? And we're estimating that at another $150,000. It's significant, but you know, you're talking about the demo of the existing infrastructure and bringing in new features, the fences, the trees, electrical, all that's got to be either purchased and installed new and relocated. So we're looking at a total project estimated about $400,000. To get to the point where we're at, we have held numerous stakeholders meetings. These meetings consisted of the 3 operators at the location, so Victoria Corner, Rudolfo's, and Wildfish, and the landlords associated with those properties. Most of them agree with the concept of the extension with one tenant objecting, but I think that as we progress through this, we'll be able to get to a common ground. And then some space will be lost due to the access to the upstairs. The fencing will be somewhat smaller, but I think that the safety improvements and the overall look that we're going to be building is greatly going to enhance this location. So here's what I was talking about earlier, which is going to maybe kind of get thrown out, you know, with the wind here, because I'll go over the schedule anyways. So tonight we're presenting this concept to council. We were going to be presenting an agreement with BFS to council, possibly at your next meeting, July 3rd. That might, now that we're going to go back to BFS, who's our consultant that we're working it with, we might need to refine their proposal. We'll see what we can do, if we can still get that before you at your July 3rd for council consideration, with only moving forward with those first 2 aspects that we discussed in the previous item. We might be able to retain this consultant under the city manager spending authority and just move forward. Regardless, I think that the city manager and I would be able to communicate that to the city council on what process we're taking. If council approves us to move forward with this tonight, which it sounds like maybe you want to have the manual first, but we'll be ready to release an RFP for construction come July 8th. So we just need to finalize up basically the bid tabulations, get a cover page on the construction document, get it stamped, notice the newspaper, put out that posting. That all takes about a week or so. So with the holiday coming up, we're thinking July 8th is a reasonable time that we could release that document to start the bidding process. Regardless of the decision that's made tonight, if we're asked to step back and wait until we have a manual, we'll be ready to go when the city council asks us to do so. We've got 95% plans. couple minor fine tunes here and there, we're ready to rock and roll. We were looking about a month, so we would have received proposals on August 9th, and that's still achievable if the council desires, and then bring it forward to city council for bid award in September and potentially construction in the fall. This is what I was saying though, is I think that this schedule maybe got skewed a little bit with the previous discussion. So the recommendation tonight for this item is to authorize the city manager to go out to bid for the construction of the Lighthouse Avenue sidewalk widening project or take alternative direction. But again, we've heard the direction from the previous report, so we're here to discuss this item and then move forward as directed by the city council. Thank you.
Public comment? Welcome.
Yeah,
The light should be off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So to clarify, I was all excited about the manual because we need that, because that is a global framework for the whole town. However, the manual that I've just seen approved is for 3 parklets. Because the bulb out actually is only concerns 3 parklets. And okay, there are some places, the sidewalk dining all around town, Guarani, Victorian Court. I mean, a lot of people have that. I'm kind of more concerned about just approving numbers 1 and 2. So this is a new development for me. I see that we're being targeted. Well, I don't want to use inflammatory language. I don't know how else to put this, but we're having a part of the program for 3 parklets and a manual for 3 parklets. And I get it that it's an aspiration that we do want to, have this look across the downtown. And I agree, it's an exciting prospect. I think there are European cities that do this kind of thing, and it is, really attractive, and it's an asset for the community. Unfortunately, Mayor, you mentioned you can't bind future councils. So if we're saying that we're just doing this now, and then maybe in the spring we're looking at, doing this across town, I don't feel that this decision offers equal protection of the law for those that are targeted. I have to challenge this, and I have to say, I expect better. I expect really to understand what the full cost is. We're talking about 11 parklets. So I hope that you will consider this, and I hope that you will offer something which is fair to all stakeholders, because at the moment I am only seeing that there is approval to go forward on 3 parklets. I can't accept that. I'm sorry. Please, if I have misunderstood, I look forward to hearing a correction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Dixie Lane.
Hello, this is Dixie Lane, and I just, I haven't heard mention of the ABC, the Alcoholic Beverage Board, or the Cal-Am requirements for these parklets. The ABC requires the fencing around. I remember this because it was we had to do some do-overs and things, but ABC requires a certain kind of fencing that if they're serving alcohol from the restaurants, which those 3 restaurants happen to serve wine and beer, I believe. And then the other thing is how many tables will be in those parklets, how many seating, how much seating will be out there, and how much it extends the seating from inside, because then their water somehow there's fees based on the number of seatings a restaurant has. And so Cal-Am also got in the in the whole setup of all this years ago when they did those three. So I would say before you approve any, the size and shape or whatever, and especially the fencing, that you run it by ABC and I think it was CalAm, whoever decides how many units of water they can have. But anyway, I just wanted to remind everybody if we need it reminding. So thank you.
Larrabee?
Hi, it's Miraby. As much as I like the trees in the middle of Lighthouse, when we're driving on Lighthouse from west to east, the parklet is not just an obstacle, but looking left with the tree in the middle of the street is also an obstacle to that crosswalk. That's it. Thanks.
We do not have any more online comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. I think that we need to do these actions simultaneously, so I'm still supportive of B1 going out to bid. I think that we're gonna have to tackle the manual as we do that, and we would move forward with our planned extension and not delay it. Otherwise, it could be years before we get any traction. But I think it's already been years. That's been pointed out already. But no, that could be even longer before we get traction, and I don't want to delay the process any further. And I think it's been a deliberative process, and there've been it's been a ton of input from the public and from subcommittees and us. I mean, I didn't count them. Maybe I did it in my dreams, in my sleep, how many meetings we've had about it, but it's been quite a few. So I think we're ready to move on it. Thanks.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. There's no reason we can't, these on two parallel efforts. In the end, they converge and there's no reason to run them serially. We can run them in parallel. Approving the last action, I don't really understand some of the comments made as far as this complicating this item. I don't see that, but I'll put that aside. There has been a lot of engagement with the stakeholders at this site. And we've got two property owners enthusiastically supporting this project as well. And one of the owners is an operator of the business there at Victorian Corner. And then Rudolfo's is supportive as well. So we did a great job in engaging the stakeholders and trying to come up with this concept, this proposal. So there's no need to delay, quite the opposite. And as far as water credits, that's kind of within the purview of the Water Management District. They go out and do audits to see if the number of credits match up with the use. So that's not really up to us. It only becomes an issue when there's a building permit, that requires a water permit. And if it's an increase of use, if they're actually expanding the number of seats. I think the way the water district looks at it is that you have to remove seats inside for the seats that you're using outside. So there can't be any net change in seating, but where you put the seatings, put the seats outside, put them on the roof, wherever, as long as that remains constant. And it's up to the Water Management District to really monitor that. And as far as the cost, remember that we're just going out to find out what the costs are. These are just estimates. And I'll mention the concrete work that that happened down at Hops and Bog, which was pretty extensive. That was $30,000. Not much. So this 251, it's an estimate. Let's go out and find out what it really is. And then, like I say, run that bid out on one rail, start getting the parklet manual done on another rail, and then we're going to converge soon and we're going to start getting this thing built. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Councilmember Coletti. I mean, I'm please, public comment.
I did not.
Ca-
I did not miss her.
Council Member McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize. It may have been what I said that made it sound like we were saying to wait. What I was actually referring to is making sure we have the manual before the construction phase starts, not the bidding phase. So the idea being, we just want to make sure that we move. So before we do any demolition, everybody knows exactly what's expected. And just because it's related to this, I know it was the last item, part of the idea is because we're moving to a citywide implementation of the bulb outs, the idea was the existing parklets are living under the existing guidelines that we have. But what we need new right now is where we're going in the future, with these three being the first three, but then new ones would presumably be going this route as well. And we would be converting additional ones. So the idea really is to have that comprehensive system for the city. And so it's not, the idea isn't to penalize or target anyone so much as to have some really clear design guidelines. So we have a vision for moving forward in the city. And so I feel that doing these parallel tracks really helps with that, because it ensures that the manual is finally developed now, which is a critical aspect of being able to move forward. But we also want to be really cognizant of the amount of the timing for the businesses. So we want to make sure to have the least impact possible. Somebody had mentioned earlier about wanting to have the least, like the time they would need to be closed. And that is our goal too. We're trying to find that window where it's least impactful for business, but also before the rainy season. So moving forward in parallel would be critical for that. So thanks.
Councilmember Peduri.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take a different stance altogether. So one is the fact is I don't see a need to fast track this. Number one. Number two is we just approved a parklet manual, and I want to see what the parklet manual design holds before we take any action on this. And third, and the most important, this is close to 400,000 just for these three parklets. If we expand it to the entire city, it's like close to $2 million. Any item which is this high ticket, I don't want to take a decision right now. We have a September meeting where we're talking about the amended budget, and we're considering priorities that the city has, infrastructure or otherwise, in the September meeting. I want to table this until that item comes in so that we can actually look at all the items together and prioritize where the money needs to go. Thank you.
Councilmember Emilio.
Yes, I do not agree with this authorized to bid construction of the lighthouse sidewalk. I agree that what was saying, I have written down here, I feel these are targeted people. We need to do the whole parklet program under this manual. That's very important. Plus, for the cost of the, I know it's an estimated cost, but according to the last CIP notes, the unfunded projects for $400,000, there's still facility projects that need to be done. There's the youth center needs to be redone. Police and the fire station has to be worked out, and the public works yard has to be those are unfunded, and that was from the last Joyce Hallaby's report. So the 401,000, I cannot agree. I think we need to move towards the manual first, get that done, and do the objectives. And I disagree with the construction of the lighthouse. I think that targets that whole block there.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Go. First, I want to bring up the question to our city attorney. By doing this one project on this one corner, or does this bring up legal issues that we're treating the property owners for this corner improperly?
I don't believe so. I think that you heard from Mr. Go that there's issues at this intersection with respect to pedestrian and vehicle visibility. And so one of the purposes of the improvement is to avoid injuries to pedestrians who might be, you know, it's a pedestrian versus a car. Most of the time, the car wins. So it would be a dangerous situation that could be allowed to continue, which is no doubt the reason why they, as I understood it from Mr. Go, they removed the crosswalk and put up a sign to direct the pedestrians to cross at a different location. So I see this as being a public purpose for this location.
And it's my understanding that not only the shortening of the sidewalks, but also extending the sidewalks towards out to the street, removing the parklets reduces the city liability. Um, am I wrong? Do I have that correct? Is there a liability or risk to the city that is reduced as a result of doing this type of work, this type of project?
Well, yeah, that's my understanding from what Mr. Go has indicated from his comments is yes, it would reduce risk for the reasons that he explained in his comments.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with my colleagues about the cost of this project. I'm always amazed at how much seemingly only cement costs. But I also look at it that this is not just what has been called one parklet. It's outdoor dining. It's not a parklet anymore with this project. And it's 3 businesses of outdoor dining and it's 2 bulb outs. So there's a lot that's packed into this one project. And if you look at it that way, then each component is a fraction of this cost. And I agree. In ideal world, yeah, the manual would come first, but as others have expressed, that this has been a long time coming. And I think that if we have this manual that's out well before construction occurs, so the business owners can respond, and hopefully we have a process also that that the business owners can come to City Hall and get approval for their shelters. We touched on that at the last agenda item, so we'll need some time for that. So manual, time for business owners to go through any city process for approvals, and then start construction. So I think that when our city staff here from the consultant for the manual, the timing, we'll get as this goes forward, we'll understand the timing and make sure that we don't get in a position where we have demolition and the business owners don't have a playbook by which to, or permits to go ahead as soon as this work is completed. So as I won't belabor my point. I think this is a great concept, and could I, if I had a magic wand, would I wave it across downtown or ask council to approve this for all of downtown? You bet I would. But this is going to take time and money, and so we have to start. And I'm all for this. So I think we're ready.
I will just, at this time, I'm gonna move approval of recommendation number 1. Second.
Okay, Mr. Mogensen, did we miss anything? We good?
I don't
don't believe so, Mr. Mayor, but I was gonna offer one thing, just in terms of communication and, because what we're gonna have tonight is we have now the direction to go ahead and go forward. The one thing that, I think, perhaps, Director Go alluded to, and that we do want to make sure that we do correctly, so we don't waste effort, is, if we go to bid and we get bids and then, those bids become stale before we award them, that's probably not a positive thing. So I think the first thing tomorrow morning we'll do is we'll try and get on the phone with our Una Johnson, the consultant, and talk about the timing on when we can deliver this draft, at least for this corner, first of all, and then make sure the timings do match up. And I believe that we can, but if it means like waiting like 2 weeks to release the bids, then it might make sense, depending on again, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, yes, you are saying that correctly. Also, I think that we could write into the bid package tentative timelines and schedules for construction. So when we receive those bids, the contractor knows, okay, we're looking at constructing in November, and I'm hypothetical time for right now, right? And award bid September, construct November. So then they know that their bid that they've given us is locked in until that construction time frame. So we could always go down that route too, and we could discuss that internally tomorrow on how we want to couch that for schedule.
And factor in time for permitting for new structures.
And that's where I'm, sitting here right now, I'm not positive we'll have that much of a leadway time depending on when our start date is. And I've heard so far that we really want our goal to be the beginning of November. And if that's the start date, that might be a little tight to have the document completely done for a long time ahead. But let me talk to, I believe we can get, some concepts and everything in front of us by, I should talk to her before I commit to anything, but in my head, I have an idea. So I think we'll try and do that.
All right. I know that doesn't satisfy everybody, but let's vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries 4-2, Pedori and Emilio dissenting. And that concludes our agenda. Thank you to the public. Thank you to staff, my colleagues for our meeting tonight. Good night, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
That was light.